How's it going, Scrub Gamers? Welcome back to another video, and it's probably one that you think maybe you've seen this one. Like, wasn't this one already out? Like, is this what's going on? Well, thanks to thanks to people pointing out that I did make a mistake in one of the points in the video. I did want to redo it and put out the correct information and not leave it out there with incorrect information. So thanks to everybody who put in the comments about incorrect information. I got wrong. I didn't realize at the time, so it's good that you pointed it out and made it clear. So I'm going to redo it and make sure the information is all correct this time. So apologies for that, and hopefully if you haven't seen it before, you see it now with the correct information. If you saw it before, you can kind of check to see what the incorrect information was. So like we've done before, we're going to get into the video and go over important rules you should know. And before you get into the video, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It keeps you updated with my videos as when they drop, and by clicking the notification bell, you can get alerts to when my videos do drop there and then, or at a later time. So, with that out of the way, let's go have a look and just basically go through this again, and go over the important rules you should know. So, starting off with deck construction. There is no minimum number of cards a deck can have. The minimum number of cards in a deck varies by format. So, currently, by normal format, it's 50 is the minimum card you can have, and then the maximum of 10 in your side. And it's the same currently for Twin Suns, but then when we get into a few more sets, I think at a certain set, I think set 3 or 4, it increased to 80 when we've got more of a card pool. But so there's no maximum number of cards, but there's a minimum, and for the main format it is 50. Also, players may include cards from any aspect in their deck, even cards with aspect icons that don't match the ones provided by their leader and or base, though playing the cards may incur an aspect penalty. I think we will go over the aspect penalty later in the video, but aspect penalty basically means that if any of the aspect icons on a card do not match what's on your leader base, then you have to pay an extra 2 resources per icon that doesn't match in addition to its actual cost. So, like I said, you can play any cards in your deck, but if the aspect icons don't match, you have to pay an extra bit of resource for those cards. There also are 3 golden rules for this game as well. So the first one is that card and rulebook take precedence. Well, card and rulebook precedence. So if the text of the comprehensive rules document directly contradicts the text of the Star Wars Unlimited Quick Start rules, then the text of the comprehensive rules takes precedence. So if the text of a card directly contradicts the text of the comprehensive rules, then the text of a card takes precedence. So it goes 3 things. So you got the rules, you got the quick start rules, the comprehensive rules, and then you got the actual text of a card. So it goes quick start rules, and then what beats that is comprehensive rules. Then what beats that is the text of the card. So the text beats comprehensive rules beat quick start rules. So good to note there. There also is a rule, like what another golden rule is, do as much as you can. So while resolving a card ability, you resolve as much of the ability as possible, and ignore any parts of the ability that cannot be resolved. But do note that you may choose to resolve abilities like involving hidden information, as though you have fewer options than you really do. So you don't know. So if there's something you can't do on an effect, as long as you can pay the cost, then you can do as much as you can. So a good example would be like Darth Vader's Darth Vader leads effect, where you tap, pay 1, and if you played a villainy unit, that villainy card, that phase, you do 1 damage to a base and 1 to a unit. If there's no units out, you still do 1 damage to a base, you just can't do damage to a unit. And if only you control units and your opponent does control units, then you have to do a damage to one of your units, because you have to do damage to a unit. It's not optional for the damage to a unit. And then the last of the golden rules is restrictions override permissions. So in the case of a conflict between a restrictive ability and a permissive ability, the restriction takes precedence. For instance, an ability that says a unit can't attack bases would override any ability that allow a unit to attack an enemy base. So if you can attack a base, or if you've got an ability that says you can attack a base, but you've also got a restrictive ability that says you can attack a base, the can overrides the can. So can attack base would override the can attack a base. There also is a little bit on card knowledge as well. So first thing is leaders. When a leader unit is deployed, it enters the ground arena ready. So currently we've only got the ground arena. We could be a future one where we have entered space, but so far it's just ground. But then even if it was exhausted before that, so when you deploy a leader, enters ready, even if it was exhausted before, because there are some effects where leaders have to exhaust themselves for an effect in the leader area. But then when they deploy ready to go, ready to fight. And then when a leader unit is defeated, it enters the base zone exhausted, even if it's ready before. So remember, if a unit is deployed or defeated, it always goes. Or it deploys ready, even if it's exhausted before, and it goes back to the leader area if it's defeated, exhausted, even if it's ready before. So do note that. It's some things that some people are unsure, because when most cards, when they come in exhausted. People sometimes, when people are learning again, they're kind of like not sure if it comes in exhausted as well, like all the other cards. But no, leaders always enter ready when they're first deployed. And then everyone is an asset penalty. So here's the asset penalty we were talking about earlier. So although a player can include units, events, and upgrades of any aspect in a deck, if they play a card with aspect icons beyond those provided by the deck's leader and base, they will incur an aspect penalty, and then that basically means for each icon beyond those that provided, the player must pay an additional 2 resources in order to play that card. So if you had say Chura with a aggressive base, that gives you heroic, vigilance, and aggression. If you wanted to play a command card, you have to pay an extra 2 on top of the card's cost because you don't have that matching. And if you want to play a command villainy, you have to pay an extra 4 because you have two icons that don't match what your leader and base provides. So you have to pay an extra 2 for each one. So I hope that makes sense. And then we got more card knowledge as well. So resourcing by effects. So if an ability instructs a player to put a card into play as a resource, the card is placed face down and exhausted in that player's resource zone and otherwise specified. And then the card is not considered played and know when abilities will trigger. So I hope that makes sense. So if you get, for example, currently we only have 3 effects in set 1 that allow you to ramp, being resupply, command, and super laser technician. So on both resupply and command, those two will enter the play, enter resource zones exhausted because they don't say otherwise. They just say resource. So you'd enter play. Those will go into your resources exhausted. But super laser technician specifically says put that card into your resource and ready it. So it will go into your resource exhausted and then ready itself because that's why it specifically states on the card. Then we have discarding effect. Discarding cards. So when an ability discards 1 or more cards from a player's hand, the player resolving the ability chooses which cards to discard, unless otherwise specified. In most cases, the player discarding from their own hand chooses, but some abilities have their opponent choose instead, usually after the opponent has looked at the player's hand. So examples of cards like Bodhi Brook and Sparkle Rebellion, which both look at your opponent's hand, and then you get to look at your opponent's hand and then choose a card out of them. So like Sparkle Rebellion lets you discard any card from your opponent's hand after having a look at their hand, and then Bodhi allows you to discard any card that's not an event, so be it an upgrade or not a unit, so an upgrade or event from their hand. But there's other cards like Force Choke, no, not Force Choke, Force Throw. That's the one that makes your opponent discard a card because it's just it says your opponent gets to discard a card. But if you're choosing yourself, you get to discard a card. So things like Force Throw, unless otherwise stated, the opponent gets to discard a card unless otherwise stated in cases like Sparkle Rebellion and Bodhi. So then we got actions as well. So we got the actions you can take are taking the initiative. So if a player takes the initiative on the turn immediately after opponent passes, the action phase ends. So if your opponent just goes pass and you take the initiative, the game ends. The turn ends, and then you go to the resupplies phase. Then you start the next turn with you having the initiative. Or if your opponent takes the initiative after you've passed, then it ends, and then the person who takes the initiative starts the next turn. And then passing an action, a player may pass even if there are other actions available for them to take. So even if you can do other actions like even if you've got resource to play a card or you've got action effects you can play, things out or attacks, you can always go ahead and just pass by basically just skipping your current action, so your opponent can then have an action, but then it go back to you because there's only an initiative that skips because the initiative is the one that skips all your actions for the rest of the phase or for the rest of the turn, whereas passion action just skips that one action. But also, when each player has passed consecutively, including when one player takes the initiative after opponent's passes, the action phase immediately ends and player proceeds to regroup phase. So if one player passes, then the other player takes the initiative. That's the end of the turn. You go to resupply phase. You draw resource and untap everything. Then you go on to the next turn. The person with the initiative starts the next turn. But if you both just pass, if you pass and your opponent just passes, it does the same thing, goes to the next turn after you do the resupply phase, but whoever has the initiative keeps the initiative because it hasn't passed to any person. Whoever had it before still has it. And then we got the regroup phase, the order, because this is one thing you would need to keep track of, because while it is like people do it, like I know I do it at locals and stuff, where I just do it in like of order, like I draw cards, I'll untap things, and then charge. Like I've done it with other games as well. Like it's something that people just do and don't really care about too much. But then when you go to big events, there are some people who are very nitpicky and they will rule shark. So it's best to understand what the order of the regroup phase, so that you didn't rule shark to kind of miss out because someone's call you out on technicality because they are right, but then it's a terrible thing to do. But then some people are like nitpicky. So the regroup phase order. First thing is you start the regroup phase. So any lasting effects that expire when the regroup phase starts expire now, and then any abilities or effects that trigger at the start of the regroup phase trigger now. Then the next step we've got is you draw cards. So then each player draws 2 cards. So that is it. So remember, at start, then draw. Then this phase after drawing is resource cards. Remember, draw, then resource. So at the start of the active, so starting with the active player, each player may choose 1 card from the hand to put in play as a resource, and you put them face down exhausted, and then players may choose not, but then players can also choose not to resource the cards. You don't have to, but you can if you want to. Because there's always a point in the game when you might think, there's too many resources, there's only too many. You can stop, you don't have to if you don't want to. And then the step after that is then when you ready the cards, and each player readies all exhausted cards they control, including units, resources, and their leader. And then you might be thinking, is that's surely it, right? But no, there is another step, and that is the regroup phase ends. So basically, any lasting effects that expire when the regroup phase ends, or when the round ends, expire now. Like this is for like the phase and for the round are examples. And then any abilities or effects that trigger at the end of the regroup phase or at the end of the round trigger now. So that's the regroup phase order. So you've got it starts, you draw, you resource, you ready, and then you end. So it's simple with the start and end, but the order is draw, resource, ready. So draw, untap, draw, charge, untapped. It's how like I've got used to it from other card games like Dragon Ball, which is that terminology. So it's draw, resource, ready. So DRR technically. So hopefully that makes sense. Just remember to keep track of it. Try and get used to it because it will help you out against a big event. If anybody becomes nitpicky about you having like readied everything before charging, because then you technically will miss out on that charge because you've done it in the wrong order and technically the other person is right, even though it's a bit of a dickish thing to do. Then we got end of the game. So there is one way to end the game, and the game ends immediately once a player's base reaches 0 remaining HP and is defeated. A player whose base is defeated loses the game, and their opponent wins the game. So that's the only way to win the game, is to make your opponent's base reach 0, and once you do, you win the game. But then once a player's base has 0 remaining HP, they cannot take any actions and cannot resolve any abilities or effects. So once a base hits 0, that's it. Nothing else can trigger after that. That's it. And in a case where both players' bases reach 0 remaining HP at the same time, the game ends in a draw. So you can end in a draw, and as if both players reach 0 on their base at the same time. And then a player can concede the game at any time, such as saying I concede or making a clear gesture. And if they do, they lose the game instantly. And that's just something that I think a lot of people don't really do, but can be important when it comes to a game. Like if you're playing a game in a match, like in a best of 3, and you come to a game and there's no clear way to there's no clear win for you. Like there's no clear way that you're gonna win. You're like being out resourced and just being basically on the back foot, and there's no chance you potentially win. It's always a smart choice to sometimes understand when you should concede and move on to the next game to have a better chance, rather than just drag on a game where you're not going to win or it's going to take a long time. Because then if you do take too long in a game that you're not going to win and end up losing it anyway, and then get to the second game or last game, and then you don't have enough time to finish it off and potentially try and win, then you're mainly not only just you basically ruin it for yourself or losing it for yourself and basically take it away from yourself, trying to not have enough time to kind of have a chance by just not giving up really when basically clear something you should. So do note that. And then we also got keyword rules. So first one is overwhelm. So if an attacker with overwhelm does not defeat the defender while attacking, no damage is dealt to the enemy base. So this is really only currently there's really like a rule that you might need to understand for Turret, because that's the only card that really affects it. Because Turret's got a unique ability where when it's deployed, it can't be defeated by damage until the regroup phase. So if it takes two more, like normally if a card takes any damage equal to or more than the HP, they're then defeated. But Charity's got that ability where he can't be defeated by damage. Well, he can't be defeated through damage, and if it does take too much damage, he defeats at the end of start of the regroup phase. So you can do it if you do more damage than his health. Yeah, just stay there and just live until the turn ends. So if you attack him with Overwhelm and you do more damage to himself, because you didn't defeat Chirrut, you won't do any damage to the base. So do note that. That's one thing that will come up if you play against it, which not many people do. Then you got Raid as well. So this is an interesting thing about Raid is where multiple instances of Raid stack. So if a unit gains Raid when it already has Raid, the numerals following each instance of Raid are added together, and then basically when the unit attacks, it gets the bonus power equal to the total value. So if you had Raid 1, if a card has like say Raid 2, and you give it Raid 1, you put those two together, so Raid 2 and 1 equal 3, so it then gain Raid 3, so when it swings, they gain a plus 3 power, because they add up all the raids together. And that's kind of like something that comes up a fair bit, and most notably, it comes up in when it comes to trying to think about what when it comes up. That's in Rebels, where you have like Green Squadron A-Wing and Red 3, because Red 3 gives all other heroic units Raid 1, what's on the board, and Green Squadron already has Raid 2, so you stack them up together, and that's what you get. And the same can be said for Restore. So Restore is exactly the same, where it's got the same value, and if you get a card that gets multiple instances of Restore, you add the numerals together, and it becomes that. So if you have Restore 2 and Restore 1 together on a card, then it add up to Restore 3. And then the last one is Saboteur. So this is a keyword that's quite unique because its effect encompasses two abilities. So it has a constant ability and a triggered ability. So Saboteur's effect is the same as the abilities, where it's got this unit may ignore Sentinel when choosing what to attack, and it's also got on attack, defeat or shield a token statue defender. So it's got two effects. So the constant ability is just the unit may ignore Sentinel when choosing what to attack, and its triggered ability is like an on attack, defeat all shields tokens attached to a defender. So if you attack a card with shields, you defeat those shields before you do exchange damage. So to ignore Sentinel means to determine the defender or base being attacked, as if no enemy units in the attacker's area or arena have Sentinel. And do note that even though you like ignore Sentinel, it does not mean that enemy units do not like lose it. So enemy units do not lose Sentinel while Sentinel is being ignored. So if when you ignore Sentinel, it's still there. It's just this card doesn't have to care about it or worry about it, but it's still on the card. They don't lose that skill. And then other useful rules. So here we have one is about decking out, because in most games you have decking out being like mill, be a strategy where you make your opponent discard the cards to the deck until they run out of cards. So have no cards, 0 cards in deck. And usually this is a way to win the game as an alternative win condition, because then if your opponent doesn't have a card to draw, they lose the game because they can't draw any more cards. But in Star Wars Unlimited, that isn't the case. So it has a different way when it comes to decking out. So for Star Wars, if a player runs out of cards in a deck, they continue playing with the cards they have in play and in hand. And if a player would draw a card from their empty deck, they instead deal 3 damage to their base for each card they would draw. And if an ability would cause a player to shuffle, discard, search, reveal, or look at cards from their empty deck, they ignore that part of the ability. So just like how we had that at the beginning, when we have you do as much as you can. So if you have no cards in your deck and you have to shuffle or do anything like reveal, search, or anything like that, you ignore that part of the ability because you can't do it because you have no cards in deck. But then when you do run out of cards in deck, you keep going, you keep playing. But then anytime you would try to draw a card or add a card from your deck to your hand, or if you would try to add a card from your deck to your hand, anytime you would draw a card, you deal 3 damage instead. So if you try to draw and you only got 1 card in your deck, you draw that 1 out of the 2 you draw for the start. So you draw 1 and then deal 3 damage to your base because you can't draw the second card. And if you can't draw 2 cards at the start of your turn, when you get to the resupply phase, then you will take 6 damage to base. So that's it. Because remember, the only way to win in the game is to make your opponent take deal damage to your opponents to a base until they have 0 health left on the base. And when you go to decking out, that's still the case, because then you start doing more damage for each card you control to work up to that. And also control of cards. This is an important one to use because it's something that comes up and isn't the same as some games. But then with the control of cards, when a unit is defeated, it is placed in its owner's discard pile. But any when defeated abilities are resolved by whichever player controlled it when it was defeated. So say you're playing against someone who has Super Laser Technician, you take it. So say you use your opponent has Super Laser Technician out, and you use can't remember the name of the card now. It's an upgrade that allows you to take your opponent's free cost on this card. I can't remember. I can't remember. But you take your opponent's card, and then the Super Laser Technician is now in your control, but it's defeated while you control it. Now, any when defeated abilities like its resource go into your resource and then ready itself would be resolved by you because you now control the card. Even if it's your opponent's card, it was resolved. It is effectively resolved for you because you were the controller card when it's defeated. So doing that is something that will come up that is quite fun. And then you also got side decking. So players may add or exchange cards to or from their draw deck, from their main deck, with cards from their side deck between games. Players may take care that both their deck and sideboard are still of legal size after making changes, and what that is at least 50 cards in their main deck and at most 10 cards in the sideboard. So this is a little bit different than some games. So like some games like I've personally played like Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball, Final Fantasy, stuff like that. Well, ones that have side decks. Usually when you side deck, if you take a card out your main deck, if you take a card from your side deck, put your main deck, you have to take out a card from your main deck to put in there. So you exchange one for one. You exchange a card in your main deck for one in your side deck, so that you have the same amount of cards that you started off with both, just some cards that exchange between. But for Star Wars, you can add all 10 of cards on your side deck to your main deck and not add anything back. So you don't have to exchange one. You can just increase your main deck. The only thing is you have to make sure there's no more than 10 cards in your sideboard when you finish, and that your main deck is still at 50 cards minimum when playing. So you can take all 10 cards in your side deck, put in your main deck, and then play games with that after sideboarding, for games 2 and 3. So that is a really important thing because it helps against decks that are focusing on milling, because that is actually a thing for set 1. Because there are some decks that like control decks that try to get later into the game and start milling you out and like recycle those mill cards, cards that make you mill. And this is a helpful thing when you come against those. You lower the consistency in your deck, but you add more cards to your deck, so that way you're less likely to deck out. So that's important there. And then we come to the last bit of the video, being the tiebreakers. So there is actually an understanding of tiebreakers when it comes to Star Wars Unlimited, which is quite good to know. So the first one, you have 3 tiebreakers. The first one is your win-loss ratio. So that basically means the number of matches the player has won and versus the number the player has lost. So this is often reserved to as X, Y, or X and Y, with X being the match wins and Y being the match losses. So usually you just have X and you have the number for how many losses. If you had lost only 2 games of how many games you play, you go X2. If you only lost 1 game out of the games you've played, you go X1, and XO if you haven't lost any games. That's usually what you refer to for your record, and so that's your win-loss ratio is the first tiebreaker. The second one is your opponent's win-loss ratio. So the win-loss ratio of the opponent's player, or the opponents the players facing in the tournaments. Everybody you've played in the tournament, their win-loss ratio is your second tiebreaker in the tournament. So if you've gone against people who have very good win-loss ratios during a tournament, you get good tiebreakers. If you've got people with pretty terrible records, that's pretty bad tiebreakers for you. And then the last one is your opponent's win-loss ratio. So the win-loss ratios of the player's opponent faced during the tournament. So you got your win-loss ratio as your tiebreaker. All the people you've played against, their win-loss ratio is your tiebreaker. Then all the opponents of your opponent's win-loss ratios are your third tiebreakers. So it's pretty difficult to kind of work out how it's gonna because there's a lot of people who go for a very long tournament, but that is the tiebreakers for the Star Wars Unlimited card game. So hopefully that was all helpful, and also updated to make sure we're giving correct information, not incorrect information like I did in the first iteration of this. But that is it for today. So thank you for the people once again. Thank you for people who pointed out that I had incorrect information with one of the bits in my previous one that I put out, because I want to make sure I'm putting out correct information, not incorrect information. So helping me know if I'm out of this, so I can basically take it down and put it back up with the right information is great, because I feel like these are kind of rules people should know, but so making sure that they're correct and not incorrect is a really good point. So once again, thank you for watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.
Like a boss.